Welcome. I'm Dave Schiller, the founder of Aegis Wealth Partners, a fee-only financial planning firm. I'm a CFP practitioner and college planning expert. In addition to the CFP, I hold a certified college financial consultant designation in addition to several others. The CCFC is a post-CFP designation that deals specifically with education funding, financial aid planning, education tax credits and deductions, and student loan advising. What we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at a case study of the Davis family, where we're going to try to manage their EFC so that we can lower the EFC, increase their aid eligibility. The way that we're going to do that today is we're going to take a look at some of their assets and look at the impact of repositioning one of those assets and how that affects the financial aid for 3 different schools. So if you recall from the previous video on EFC, this is what schools believe you can afford. It's not necessarily what you'll pay, but it's what they believe you can afford. And if you haven't watched the video, I'd suggest you take a look at it because it does get a little complex when dealing with EFC and the different types of EFC and which schools use it and how it's based. So EFC is driven by income and assets for both parents and student. And the EFC is first determined in what's called the prior year. So for example, if we have a student that's going to be attending college in the fall of 2024, the tax and financial information that they're going to be using for the base year is from 2022. So ideally planning should be done before the senior year. Now, let's take a look at the Davis family. We have some information here about them. Jen and Bob are married. They filed jointly. They have a son, Jethro. What I want to point your attention to is the bottom row, the taxable account. That's what we'll be dealing with in this video. You can see that Bob and Jen have $50,000 in assets in taxable accounts, and their son, Jethro, has $22,000 in a UTMA account that was gifted to him from his grandparents. So Jethro will be graduating in the spring of 2026, and he will start college in the fall of 2026 as well. So his GPA right now is a 3.3. His weighted GPA is 3.4. He has a 1270 SAT and a 25 ACT. He's looking at becoming an engineering major. And we see a list of schools that he has put together. These are schools that he would be very happy to attend. He does have a question mark there because he said that he's willing to look at some other options out there if they are a good fit for him, but he's just unaware of what else might be out there. So going through the Davis family and their financial information, we see that their federal EFC currently, as it stands, is at $42,000. Recall, the federal EFC is what is used to determine federal financial aid. The institutional EFC is $30,000 and the consensus EFC is $23,000. The Davis family does qualify for the American Opportunity Tax Credit. So that's $2,500 for all 4 years of the undergraduate studies. So that's what we have as the starting point on the pre-approval amount. So the Davis family is based in Arizona. That's where they live. And so we're going to look at an in-state public university. That will be Arizona State in the Phoenix area. Cost of attendance, we anticipate being approximately $34,000 in 2026. It's public university, so there really isn't much in the way of needs-based grant. Jethro does qualify for an automatic scholarship in this case. ASU is actually quite generous when it comes to the automatic scholarships. So they have quite a few of them. And based on his grades and test scores, he qualifies for a $5,000 scholarship that is available for all 4 years. The net cost of attendance then becomes $29,000. Again, the pre-approval amount, $2,500. And the funding gap is $26,500. So if we look at the 4-year total, the merit scholarship, $5,000 for 4 years, it's at $20,000. We have a pre-approval amount of $10,000. The funding gap for Jethro and the Davis family is $112,000. If they should fund that gap with student loans, the total amount for a 10-year standard repayment plan would be approximately $1,250 a month, or $149,600 in principal and interest. There is another repayment plan that they could use called the extended plan. It's a 25-year repayment plan, and it does significantly reduce the monthly payment to approximately $725 a month. But you see the principal and interest then ramps up to $217,000. The other issue here is that, we're now getting into very long term for this note, and it's essentially a very similar length as a mortgage. So while the monthly payments are significantly lower, as a 25-year payment, it's a really difficult and unappetizing type of payment plan to be involved with. So, but you see the 10-year repayment plan. It's a little bit more than a third of the take-home pay that Jethro is expected to earn as an engineering graduate from ASU. So that's right now, it's a pretty pricey cost for the education. So like many Arizonans, when it gets hot in the summer, we love to head over to San Diego because it seems like it's 75 degrees all year round. And Jethro has grown to love San Diego as well. So he thought if there's an opportunity for him to attend school, he would be very interested. So he had been looking into San Diego State University. But as an out-of-state student, the cost of attendance, we expect to be approximately $48,000. Again, no needs-based grants for a public university, let alone an out-of-state student. And there are no automatic scholarships that we have identified. So right now, his net cost of attendance is $48,000. We take out that pre-approval amount, and his funding gap for the first year is $45,600. Over the course of 4 years, we see a funding gap of $191,000. So if the Davis family, if they decide that they're going to fund that gap with student loans, and that could be the federal direct, could be Parent Plus, or it could even be private loans, that would come out to $2,100 per month. Little more than $250,000 in principal and interest. So you can begin to understand the implications of applying to an out-of-state public university, or applying to an out-of-state public university as an out-of-state student. That generally, for many states, it's much more expensive. And even though the 25-year extended repayment plan drops the monthly payment by nearly $900, the grand total in principal and interest is nearing $370,000. So a huge chunk of the take-home pay for an engineering grad from San Diego State. For private university, like most families, we would love our children to attend Stanford, certainly a great source of pride, but we also know that Stanford is a very expensive school. We expect the cost of attendance to be right around $89,000. So the Davis family wonders, well, how could we ever afford for Jethro to attend? Well, because it's a private university, and Stanford happens to be quite generous in the needs-based grants that they offer their students who qualify, they would actually offer Jethro an aid package where he would receive $63,660 in needs-based grant for the first year. So this is essentially a discount. It's money that he does not need to repay. So that drops the net cost of attendance all the way down to $25,600, removing the pre-approval amount of $2,500. We have a funding gap of $23,000. And then you see the needs-based grant is actually $267,500 over 4 years. and that drops the 4-year funding gap down to $96,000. So certainly, the most attractive of all of the options that we've looked at. Nevertheless, if loans are taken out to cover that funding gap, it's still over $1,000 a month, and the total principal and interest becomes $128,000. So the estimated take-home pay for an engineering graduate is the highest of all 3 universities, but really not enough to make a difference where we're looking at more than 25% of the take-home pay would go towards servicing that student loan debt. So it's still a really big chunk of that paycheck would have to go towards student loan debt. So we'll revisit here the family data. Again, we'll focus on the bottom row, which is the taxable account assets. And so what we're going to look at is we're going to consider removing that UTMA account and placing it into the as a taxable account for the parents, Jen and Bob. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to liquidate the UTMA, and we are able to fund a 529 plan with the UTMA assets. That is actually a transaction that is acceptable for a UTMA. But what you do need to do to fund the 529 plan is you have to liquidate it. It's not just a simple transfer of assets. You have to liquidate whatever assets are being held in the UTMA account, because a 529 plan must be funded with cash. So the issue then becomes, if this is a situation that you have to be aware of the timing of this type of transaction. So it's a very simple transaction. The mechanism is very easy, but if you're doing it in your base year, what will happen is you may end up triggering capital gains tax, and that could affect your EFC. So again, timing is very important. In the case of the Davis family, this is not an issue. So we can go ahead and do that without worrying about how that will impact EFC. Of course, there may be tax implications, but that's beyond the scope of this presentation and what we're trying to accomplish here. Also, for many states, they offer a state tax deduction for 529 contributions. What you will need to be aware of is, depending on the state you reside in, each state will have at least one 529 plan that they sponsor. So for certain states, they will require you to use their sponsored 529 plan to get that tax deduction. Now, of course, all of this is based on whether you qualify for the deduction, but the point being, depending on where you're at, just check your tax code or ask your CPA whether you do get that tax deduction in the state you reside. For Arizona, Arizona is very forward thinking. They are agnostic in terms of which 529 plan you use. So if you use the state of Arizona's plan, that's great. If you decide that you want to use Virginia's plan, that's also great. They don't care. As long as you qualify, you'll get that deduction on your state return. So the key point, though, and the big impact is what we've done is we're going to be removing an asset from the student column, and we're going to be placing it in the parent column. And if you recall from the EFC video, the assessment value of a parent asset is significantly lower than the assessment value for a student asset. So this is where we want to see what is the impact of moving $22,000. So we go down to the family data, and we see that Jethro has 0 assets in his taxable account. We've liquidated his UTMA, and we've funded a 529 plan. This is being held in the parent's name. They are the owners. So their taxable account column that has increased from 50,000 to 72,000. Now, what we want to do here is rerun those numbers and see how that impacts federal EFC, institutional EFC, and the consensus EFC. And as you can see, they all change by a different amount. So for the federal EFC, we've actually lowered EFC by $3,000, so it's now $39,000. For the schools that use the institutional methodology, we dropped the EFC from 30,000 down to 25. And for the schools that use the consensus EFC, we lowered it by $1,000. It's now $22,000. You'll also notice that the pre-approved tuition has increased by $5,000, by $5,500. And the reason that it's $5,500 is that we have taken, we're actually just going to do a simple spreading out of the 529 plan and doing $5,500 a year. So that's where we come up with that number. The reason that we didn't include the UTMA in the pre-approved tuition amount in the first place is because while those assets may have been used for tuition, legally, a UTMA account, when the child turns the age of majority, they can do whatever they want with the assets. And I have actually seen cases where a student has come in the day after their 18th birthday, they liquidated their account, and they've used the money for things that the parent most certainly did not want them to use the money for, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So by transferring the UTMA to a 529, now we've really committed those assets with more certainty to be used towards college education, and that way the student doesn't use the assets for some other reason. Okay, let's visit Arizona State University, our in-state public option. So the top half of the chart, nothing changes, $34,000 is the cost of attendance. Jethro still maintains that merit scholarship. Changing the UTMA to a 529 has no impact on that. So the net cost is still $29,000, but you see the pre-approval amount, $8,000. The funding gap then drops from $26,500 to $21,000. And over 4 years, the $112,000 becomes $90,000. So we see $22,000 less in the funding gap. So if they take out loans to fill that gap, we see a decrease in monthly payments over a 10-year repayment plan of nearly $250. But most importantly, what we see is nearly $30,000 in savings on the principal and interest side. So a really big move. This is a way where the EFC did go down, and we've just committed those extra dollars to the pre-approved tuition. So all in all, this was just a really smart move by the Davis family to do so. And then if we look at the out-of-state public option, San Diego State University, again, the top half, there's really no difference. $48,000 is what we believe the cost of attendance will be at that time. Pre-approval amount, $8,000 now, and the funding gap of $40,000. Over 4 years, $191,000 is now $169,000 for the gap. So the numbers here work out the same. It's approximately $250 less per month, and also about $30,000 less in principal and interest. But just because Jethro is an out-of-state student and we don't have any merit or needs-based grants, we're still looking at a very expensive option if that's where Jethro indeed ends up going to college. Now, we're going to look at the private university option, Stanford, and this is really where things get interesting because, of course, we've increased the pre-approval rate, but because we have dropped the EFC, because the UTMA transferring that over to a 529, we've lowered the assessment value of that $22,000, and the net effect of that is that we've increased the needs-based grant that Stanford will offer to Jethro, and that's nearly $4,000 in that first year. So when you back out that pre-approval amount, we see that the funding gap goes from about $22,000 in the first year to just under $13,000. So we've really impacted the net cost of attendance and that funding gap in two positive ways. So the 4-year total, we have increased the needs-based aid by $15,000, and the funding gap, instead of being $92,000, it's at $55,000. So the 10-year repayment plan now is $610 for a total of $73,000 principal and interest. And for many people, that's actually a car payment. So this becomes a much easier bill for the Davis family to handle if Jethro were to attend Stanford University. So again, a great move, a simple move. The mechanisms of it are very easy to do, and we've lowered monthly payment by $415 a month. Very smart move, and this is what I've said, where if you're the informed buyer, you can really make big difference in your EFC. So again, by changing the characteristic of an asset, by assessing $22,000 to the parent rather than to the student, we've lowered the EFC. For the public schools, what that means is that they've had to finance a lower amount of money in terms of the loans they had to take out, and that equated to savings of $30,000 over a 10-year repayment. For the public university, the effect was much greater because we received $15,000 in additional needs-based aid. So it's something that he doesn't have to pay back. It's essentially just another discount off the sticker price. And the 10-year repayment plan was cut by $415 per month. And the net interest and principal savings is nearly $50,000. So again, the informed and smart buyer here, just making a really good move, making good decisions, and it's really paying off. So what we're going to do for the next video is we're going to revisit the Davis family, and we're going to look at how they can pay some debt off to increase their EFC. So really an interesting case. So if you like the topic, if you found this helpful, again, subscribe so that as we are adding new videos, you'll get the notifications of when they come up. And then I'd also highly recommend that you grab the College Money Report. You're going to find out in about 5 minutes how much tuition you're pre-approved for, what's your EFC, what the funding gap is, and you can get that in, you can click the link in the comments section, or you can head over to our website, aegiswealth.net. If you go to the resources tab, it's the first sub tab, and you can get the College Money Report from there. So until next time, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.